I had to look away because it was just like, damn.
We interrupt all radio and television programs for an indefinite period. Please keep your radio and television sets turned on. This is...
Monster movies. Gojira.
I'm Austin.
And I'm Cloud.
And this week's movie is Them. Them is a 1954 horror science fiction monster movie film. Directed by Gordon Douglas, starring James Whitmore, Edmund Gwynn, Joan Windleton, and James R. Ness. How about a plot synopsis?
Well, after all of the nuclear testing out in the desert, several generations of ants have mutated into biblical proportion-sized monsters of destruction. That's all that really matters. Like, we could tell you more about how the story involves scientists and the government and military trying to stop these ants, but it's not as important or as cool as giant ants.
The military.
Eating children. Yeah.
Did they eat any children? I don't think they eat any children.
They didn't eat the children.
Guess they eat some other people.
Yeah. They ate an arm. I guess. They didn't find the arm, so
what we have here is something pretty rare for us, at least, is cops doing their job.
Yeah. And actually not sucking at their job. Like, the cops do a better job at their job than the military is at their job. I mean, when the general goes, I've never fired a bazooka before, like, what kind of fucking training did you have?
Well, I guess it wasn't training.
With bazookas.
So, maybe when he was in infantry, they didn't have bazookas yet or something, since he's been in long enough to become a general. I don't know.
Well, not good enough. All right.
It's not the wind.
It's not the wind. It's never the wind.
It's not the wind.
Anytime a character, even if in real life, someone goes, "Hey, what's that sound?" and another person replies with, "It's the wind," go ahead and shoot that friend, that person, whoever it is. Go ahead and shoot them, because they're only going to make things worse for you.
Yeah. It's not the wind. It's not a dolphin, and it's not the wind.
No.
I mean, let's. Does that sound like the wind? Have you ever heard wind that sounds like that? I don't think so.
If I did, I probably wouldn't be alive right now.
Well, he has a line. He says something about the wind can get pretty creepy out here or something. It's like, not that creepy. No.
Well, it's not like the wind has a mustache and, wrings its hands while laughing maniacally. Like, no, the wind doesn't get creepy. The wind blows.
Yeah. I do really like how we sort of start out the whole thing not knowing what's going on and stay that way for like a long time. And they're sort of collecting clues and coming up, like, not really coming to any kind of conclusion. And it's not really until we get the scientist where he's like, perhaps the nuclear bomb. And it's like, okay, well, right there, maybe you stepped a little far, a little fast. But up till that point, it's like, well, we don't know. It's like a crazy thing happened. We're just treating it like it's a thing, and we've never seen anything like this before.
I feel like that step could have been more easily controlled if they would have simply had somebody out there with a Geiger counter, as it's the mid 50s, late 50s, and everybody's afraid of like the radiation, and there's all the testing and business, so it kind of makes a little sense to have people running around carrying Geiger counters.
I guess. I mean, he says where was like the first bomb was like around here, and he points to the map, and it's like, yeah, it was like right here. So,
which seems really close. Like, oh, there's people who live out here, but it's okay. The testing. Like the bombs, the explosion isn't that big, so they're fine.
Yeah.
Plus if they had those, lead refrigerators, they'll be fine. Now, for starters, one of my issues now, I know it's 54 or 53 whenever they filmed this, but when they had the POV of the car, it's not like the people in the car, it's like the car itself. That was so shaky.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so shaky. While I was watching it, I had to look away because it was just like, damn. Like someone's suspension needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just a 50s car. They didn't have ultimate arm cars or anything to put cameras on.
They need to put some suspension on that 50s car because that was terrible. And at the start, I felt bad for the little girl because, the little girl out in the desert with her stuffed animal all alone, having been scared stupid. And it's just like, I'm thinking she came from that trailer. And where are her parents? Because like all the other bodies, they found the bodies of all the other victims except for her parents.
Well, are we supposed to take because when they first in the helicopters, when they're searching for where the anthill is, they find it and there's like an ant with like a rib cage that looks like it's human and it's like sticking up out of the hole within, waving it around threateningly. So maybe, I guess that's one of the parents, maybe. Well, because they had like, that's your missing people right there. And it's like, okay, but which missing people? I mean, they didn't say who, because there was the people from the trailer. There was the guy that was running the shop that got broken into, but they found him in the basement. And then the other cop. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there was the cop that went missing. Okay. I forgot about the cop. So it could have been him too, I guess. Probably him since he was more recent. Well, I guess they left very clean rib cage. Yeah. Like there's nothing left on it. Like those ants leave no waste. I guess maybe they left the shopkeeper guy because he had enough sugar. And the trailer didn't have very much sugar, so they ate the people instead. Well, they even left sugar. A little bit, but it was just like a canister in the trailer. Hey, if I was a hungry ant, I'd eat all that sugar. And I like how it takes us a lot. I mean, everybody sort of credits this to being a Jaws thing, but that it's not necessarily true. They did do it accidentally, and it turned out to be much the better for the movie. But they do the same thing in this, where it takes us a long time to see them the first time. So you hear the sound a bunch of times, and it's kind of creepy, and people disappear, and you see all the damage to everything. But you don't really know like what it is until because you see them before the guy says that it's ants, because he won't tell them, because he's like, I have to be absolutely sure of the science before his people may panic, and this could change everything, and so you and biblical proportions. Biblical proportions is not a unit to measure by. I didn't even think about that line. I forgot about that line, or I would have pulled the mayor from Ghostbusters. What do you mean biblical? Okay. A long time ago, I remember. Yeah, like I think I was like 6 or 7, and I bought a VHS tape because I had money. It wasn't my money. It was probably my mother's money. It doesn't matter. I bought it because I was boss, and it was screw the rules. I'm buying a VHS tape. That's right. It was like a little compilation, if I can even say this word. You want help? Yes. Compilation. Okay, so it was a compilation of like all these monster movies from like way back then. It had like God Wars and Behemoth and 20,000 Leagues, and It Came from the Depths, and like all like the Ray Harryhausen stuff. And it was kind of like a documentary showcasing all these films. And even them was in this one. But it had that line from the scientists just talking about the biblical proportions. And I always wondered like what constituted as biblical proportions. Like, so every time I hear it, I'm just like, no, that's not real math. Stop it. Okay, so like the cops actually being good at their job. The only thing I really had an issue with is he just picks it up and there's like this rag and it's got blood on it. And he just wipes his hands. Yeah, it's just like,
this blood is like 10 or 12 hours old. It's just like you just looked at it. It's not like you examined it. You just picked it up and said that line.
Well, you can kind of tell by the color within that period of time if it's been at least that long.
Well, I'm saying it's not like he looked at it though. He just picked it up and said it. Because I was like really, you're not going to inspect it, so he just picks it up and just says the line. I'm like, damn it, slow down.
Yeah, and touching the evidence.
Yep. Now the shell, I want to know how the shell part got underneath the bed. Like they never even came back to it.
I think the girl hid under the bed. That's how she survived. She hid under the bed until them left. Okay,
well I can go with that. It's just like there was that piece of the shell that was underneath the bed, and he just picked it up. And so okay.
Well, it wasn't a shell; it was a piece of the doll's head. Because he fits it back onto the head when he gets back to the car.
Okay, well, I didn't notice that then.
Mm-hmm.
No, I like how he picked up the gun, and it's like, oh, take a pencil in the barrel, look at it, smell. Okay, yeah, it's been used.
Yeah, well, the smelling is fine, but the sticking the pencil in the barrel, you see that all the time in cop movies and noir movies, and
50s.
It's the wrong way to do it because you'll scratch the inside of the barrel and mess up ballistics potentially. You probably won't because a pencil's pretty soft, but you might, so you don't want to risk it. You should stick the pencil into the trigger guard and pick it up to smell it.
All I'm saying is it's the 50s.
So, real police knew not to do it, but it shows up in movies all the time.
If it happened, tomorrow, then I could agree with you. But this is the 50s.
There was actually, I got a book from the library when I was a kid that it was a pretty old book at that, because this is probably, 15 years ago, and it was already 30, 40 years old, the book at that point. I think it was printed in the early 60s or something like that. That was it was a kids focused book, but it was showing you how the police investigated crimes and stuff, and they mentioned that specifically.
Oh wow.
That you might see that in movies, but if you're investigating a crime, don't do it. You'll mess up the barrel.
Okay, so there's the cops doing their job, and then they go outside and they look for clues. They find the sugar, and then they find the footprint, and it's not a cat.
Nope.
It could be. I mean, I guess there's cats that live in the desert, but I mean, I'm not an expert on desert ecosystems or anything like that, so I'm not going to say there are cats that live in the desert, but I'm not saying there are not.
Well, there's probably, probably something of some kind. It's pretty large, though, to be a cat.
Yeah.
It's not a dolphin track.
No, it's not a dolphin track. And if it was, the world already ended, and no one knew it yet.
Why is there only one print, though?
I don't know. I mean, you can't say the wind blew the rest of the prints away, because it's not like the print that they found was isolated and protected from the wind. It's just, And then they break into the shop because for some reason they got to go to the shop for something, and they get there and it's been can of sardines tore open.
Mm-hmm. Well, they know that the shop is nearby, and maybe old man what's his name knows something. I don't know why he would know something, but maybe he knows something.
Well, you can't know anything if you're dead. And whoever they had play the dead body in the basement did a terrible job because the body was moving. You could very obviously tell the guy was there and breathing because you could see his chest lift. And I'm just dude, hold your breath for a little bit. Let us film this, and then you can go back to breathing. Shit, you are the worst dead body ever.
You had one job!
And you fucked that up too. Having someone close their eyes and lay down a dead body does not make.
No. There's a lot of things, especially in this early part, where it's a movie that's a movie. They're making a movie for, which I've said in other contexts later Later, I have said things. No. I've said before that they're making a movie and you can tell, and that is a negative thing. But there's a lot of things because there's a difference between a movie and like radio. And like if you don't watch a movie, like maybe a movie or TV, people, John Rogers says TV is radio with pictures because people aren't half paying attention when they're watching TV, which is true in a lot of cases. But there's stuff like that they don't say anything about. Like they come into the shop and they look around and there's like the coffee is still on, like he was making coffee and it's still steaming. So you're like, okay, he was here. It wasn't very long. And it's not like they touch the hood of the car and say, well, the engine's still hot. Like they don't hang a flag on it, but it's just there. And you're like, So you just sort of see them investigating and you have to sort of pick up on the stuff too. And it's not like any of it's hard, but you have to actually be looking at the movie in order to get it.
Well, it's communicated with visuals and not audio.
Yeah, which it should be.
Because it's a movie.
Too often it's not, though.
I like that sound they make. I don't know if ants actually make noise, but like I can see this like terrible screaming windy sound as being like, oh, giant ants.
It's not a windy sound.
Just it's in the wind though. It's like for some reason the wind always has to blow.
Except in the sewer.
They probably couldn't fit the fan in there.
Yeah. Well, the wind blows every time up until we know what it is. And then it sort of stops because it's like, well, we could blame it on the wind a couple more times. Like, no one will notice.
Like the lady scientist, the daughter out there, and she's investigating, and then like the wind starts blowing, and they hear it, and then it's still blowing, and there's the giant ant. She just has to scream. I'm like, well, you could be running away.
Yeah. Well, she starts to, and then she falls. So
it's an old movie, and women need to be saved by men because of old movies.
Well, there's how that this week in sexism, where there's that just them. They're like, you're not going in there, and neither is any other woman. Like, we're the men. We're gonna go check it out. Like when they're gonna go after they dump the napalm on the hole or whatever. Actually, it's not napalm. Why don't they use napalm?
I don't know. I guess napalm wasn't a big thing at the moment. It's like, oh, we have phosphorus.
Yeah.
Like, let's just use these bazookas.
Yeah.
And fire phosphorus at it.
Yeah.
Like, well, we're gonna make the surface hot in the middle of the day when they don't come out anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like, well, we can keep we'll do it in the middle of the day because it'll be hot then and they don't want to come out and they should all be in the hole. But in case it's not hot enough, get the bazookas. Because shotguns are not enough in this case.
Well, you're going to need some double-aught buck or something against these things.
You know what? I don't think there is a single shotgun in the entire movie.
No.
The shopkeeper dude has a rifle, but it's not a shotgun. So, no shotguns.
Okay, so like I like the sound of the giant ants. I think that's pretty cool. There's two comments that are made that I have to throw out there. Armored like a battleship.
Yeah, I almost clipped that just because I liked it so much. But
the thing is, there's another old movie like this called The Claw, which is, I guess, about a giant ass buzzard that flies really fast. And like they keep mentioning that it's the size of a battleship. And at this point, I'm wondering how many of these people have ever seen a battleship.
Are we back to sort of like math by biblical proportions?
Yeah,
it's just like, hey, let's make an analogy that very few people have direct experience of.
Yeah.
Just like, well, I guess we understand battleships are pretty large, so that's good enough. They'll understand. It's big. But just saying it's really big is not enough. What can we compare it to? What has everybody seen? Well, battleships. Of course, maybe in the 50s, I guess we're close enough to the end of World War II. Maybe most people had seen a battleship. I don't know.
Well, I guess you'd have like all the people who got to go back home after the war, and they're with somebody out watching the movie. It's like, oh, well, that's actually really big.
Although not the largest of ships, a battleship.
Yeah. Okay, and the other one was, I thought the FBI were whiz kids.
No, actually, that's not what he says, because he says quiz kids, which is actually what became whiz kid, which is why whiz kid makes no sense and sounds like an insult, because it's like you just know everything, like you can just snap right off with answers to stuff. That's a quiz kid. And it just sort of, people dropped the Q off of it at some point, and now the phrase makes no sense. But yeah, I thought that was really cool, because I was like, you never hear anybody say the real phrase. And you didn't even hear him say it, because you were hearing what you thought he said. Yeah.
Yeah, I blame my pitch and tone deafness on that one. So I plead innocence. No, but he says that, and it's just like, well, they're not really kids.
No.
They're the FBI, and I'm pretty sure the FBI doesn't allow kids, especially the FBI in the 50s.
Well, there's probably some movie in the 50s where like some kid gets deputized because something or another. I mean, there's a bunch of movies like that where kids sort of get involved in the middle of some giant thing. There's that one that has Robbie the Robot reused in it. Or there could be some really patronizing scene in something where the FBI like pins a stupid sheriff badge on a kid and says, "Hey, you're in the FBI. You'll help us now." Well, actually, no, wait. I mean, he's not in the FBI, and he doesn't do exactly that. But Hogarth, he treats Hogarth that way in The Iron Giant, where he's sort of like, "Hey, you could help us with the," and that takes place in the 50s. So. And he also has that his vacation is extended indefinitely. Yeah, that's in that scene too, or in the scene just before it.
See, I'm not exactly sure if that's actually a good thing or a bad thing. It's like, well, if my vacation has been extended indefinitely, then I must be rolling in bank or dead, and then it won't matter either way.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm not exactly super science literate, but when they go, that man was filled, like he could have died in 5 different ways, and it's like his skull was fractured and his back and neck was broken and stuff, and he had enough formic acid in him to kill 20 men.
Formic
I'm like,
acid.
how? I thought it was formic.
Formic acid, yeah.
Oh, yeah, formic acid. Was that had enough to kill 20 men? I'm like, how much formic acid is needed to kill one man?
I don't know. I don't imagine it's a circumstance that comes across commonly.
I mean, because like I'm not like I'm not hating on this one like I was the other ones. It's just because I don't know anything about this formic acid. I don't know exactly how much is required to kill a person. So if there's like enough to kill 20 people, then damn. Like he probably had that shit oozing out from his eyes or something. And the reason why I ask is because later on you find out that the old man scientist is like carrying around like a little container of it. And he's just like, this little girl seems to be all kinds of messed up. Here, let her sniff this formic acid because she's about to trip balls.
Yeah.
And
she needs it. Well, the nurse says she needs a catharsis, which I thought was a positive experience. But that's not really what happens, because he's like, hey, let's remind her of the thing that scared her into shock.
Yeah.
So, and then she'll just start to scream.
Well, I guess 2 negatives made a positive.
Nope. Not how it works.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In my notes, it has little girl is now better. Them, because at this point, every so often they will say them. You know, they don't always refer to them as ants, but after that little girl like screams them, you like I noticed it. Them! Yeah, that. They say it more frequently.
They do. Like, well, because up till that point, they don't have a name. It's like graboids. Like nobody really calls them anything specific because they don't even know really that there's anything to call them. Because they haven't seen them yet. The doctor has suspicions. Yeah. But because they don't go out to the desert and get attacked by the first one until the scene right after the girl. So they don't even know. But yeah, then everybody just sort of adapts it as calling it that. And then nobody ever gives them, because they don't ever really say giant ants ever. He says it on the radio emergency broadcast thing. Which I'm really surprised at, because they're like, we can't tell anybody. And then they're just going to, and he says, the city is now under martial law because giant ants, because nuclear testing. And it's like, you didn't have to tell everybody the whole thing. Yeah. Also, pretty low amount of panic as well from people once they know.
Well. I guess out in California, anything can happen. Now, okay, so they fix the little girl, and he's like, okay, we need to go back out to the desert. And I don't know if at this point, I'm not as familiar with any of these characters in the police and FBI section, so I don't know if he is local police or if he's FBI. But he goes, but it's getting late. I'm like, so? Does it matter? Like
that's the main cop, I think, isn't it?
I think so.
I think it's the main cop, yeah.
It's just like, we need to go back out to the desert, but it's late. Like, science stops for no man.
Yeah.
And then they go out there, and it's still daylight by the time they leave, so it getting late has nothing to do with the issue.
Yeah, must not be that late.
And then it's like, we can't tell anybody. There'll be a panic, because there's always a panic, because it doesn't matter like what period of time it is. There's always something bad going on, and if you tell the public this as well as the other stuff, there'll be a panic.
Yeah. There might be a panic. I suppose there would be a panic. I mean, people seem to panic over not that much.
Dude, people panic over Black Friday. I ain't even interested. Okay, now, like, the lady scientist, I don't have, like, a proper thing to call her. It's just the lady scientist. When she wandered off, I was like, something's gonna happen. Yep, something's gonna happen. And then, like, that's when the screaming ant sound started, and I still like it. Like, there's another movie that MGM did, and it was, like, Empire of Ants, and there was, like, brainwashing and other kinds of shit. I still enjoyed that movie, but the sound the ants made was terrible. And the audio levels were like constantly redlining, but this was good, and I like this. And then that's when a giant ass ant head was just like, "Hey, pretty lady, I want to eat you," and then she starts screaming.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Shoot it, and shoot it in the antennae," and like they go for it, and they hit like one, and he's like, "Now hit the other one," and they suck. Yeah. Like, they never have to practice using their guns. And then it's just like, hey, we have, like, a various type of machine gun in the car. Let me go get it. And they kill, like, one ant with the entire magazine. Yeah.
Well, it's a Thompson. It's the Tommy gun without just take the barrel clip off.
Which
so police
Thompson
did carry. They used to carry, like, in certain cities, especially, they would carry a Thompson submachine gun and a shotgun in the trunk of the car, and then they would have their pistols.
Hell, they still carry shotguns.
Yeah, but they don't often carry submachine guns.
No.
Except in special cases.
Yeah.
Maybe in Compton.
Okay, helicopter ride.
Oh yeah, all the business with the radio.
Yeah, like, what the... Like, come on, man, like... I know it's supposed to be the rules and shit, but you got a scientist. It's like he's a doctor, not a soldier. and you know he's talking to his daughter, so it doesn't really matter.
It's the rules, and he goes on about the rules, and the whole scene he talks about the rules. And then when they're on the jeeps later going through the sewer, no one says over ever.
Yeah,
it's like, but what about the rules?
Whole bunch of bullshit.
Screw the rules.
I have money.
So then they decide, well, it's ants, maybe bazookas and like fire and cyanide and stuff. And we'll drop it down the hole and that should do it.
Well, I really do like this movie. And if this movie was made at a more recent to now time, I would have higher expectations for it. Because, like, when they're in the office and they're having the meeting and he's describing what ants do and how they work and all that kind of business, and he's like, these, like, ants are smart because they build water traps so their, like, nest doesn't flood. And the ants in this movie don't seem any more intelligent than it's like, hey, it's a stuffed figurine that's huge and it doesn't really move other than its head bobbling, and we're going to light it on fire. So it gets away with it because it's in the 50s, but if it was like done now, it's like, nope, we need more. We need like smart ants, like setting up traps for people.
We're going to, in a second, kind of pick up where we were, but for some reason, when we were recording this episode to start with, we lost like the last 30 minutes of it. And so we're having to do everything ahead that you heard was all in one piece like it normally is. Normally we run right straight through, but this time, past this point, we're recording a couple of days later. So if you think, what, that sounds a little bit different, yeah, it's not at the same time. So we're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes or tell you it's the wind or anything.
Because it's not the goddamn wind.
So hopefully the rest of the episode is at least as good as the rest of the episode was the first time we did it. So yeah, I guess they make a big deal about how ants are smart and stuff, but they don't really set any traps or anything or learn from anything. I mean, the graboids set traps. They learned. But
yeah, well, like they actively show that, hey, you're having to interact with the creature in the film. The ants just existed. And it's like, oh, we have to show up to this location and then set them on fire, and that's all we're going to do.
Yeah. So then, after they set it on fire, then they have to go down in the hole and check it out. And like we have these stakes that like because it's big, but it's not meant for people, so they have to like climb down with ropes and stuff. And they keep hammering these climbing stakes into the ground to attach the ropes to, and it's not as bad as Kevin Bacon's hammering, but it's still pretty bad. Because he like keeps skipping off of it, and like he's not really hitting it hard enough, and it's like it's still not the best hammering.
You'd think that at this point in time, people would just start buying rubber mallets because it's more difficult to miss with a rubber mallet.
I guess they're at least bigger hammers.
Yeah,
I did like they get down into the egg chamber, and they sort of shine the light around, and you can kind of see in the eggs. You can kind of see the not the inside of an ant egg, because they make a big point about how they're not eggs anymore, really. They sort of hatch like actual ants already. But you can kind of see something moving around inside the eggs. And so I like that it wasn't just like solid eggs, that you could kind of see what was inside.
Yeah, like they had that clear kind of substance they were made out of. They looked like they could have been something real, like something organic, and you're like, oh yeah, this could have been a real gigantic mutant ant egg.
Yeah. They looked better than the actual ants.
Yeah.
But you don't have to see as much of them, I guess.
Yeah, ants kind of look terrible.
So they figure out, because they see eggs, like some of the eggs are empty. And the daughter is like, those are queen eggs, or is it back when they get to the surface that the doctor guy is like, those are queen eggs?
Either way, they think they're queen eggs,
and they're like queens, and like the special males that stay with the queen, they can fly. It's like, okay, great. As if it wasn't bad enough that we have giant ants, now they fly too. And actually,
well, like, I don't
doesn't
know how
that break?
They fly? I mean, it's like fucking like gravity and shit, and they're going to be huge.
Yeah.
They're going to sound like jet engines taking off. That might actually be the wind on that one, though, maybe. Well, okay, so they talk about like these ants, and like, oh, the queen ant can fly, and her male ants that take care of her, they can fly too. And they're going to fly into the sunset and have their honeymoon and all this kind of business. And then he goes into the speech about how this is like the worst possible thing that could ever happen to humanity, because ants will eat people and we have to stop them. And this is like the first ever speech that mankind is doomed to extinction because of like their mistake in animal mutations and all that other kind of shit. That's like the first one ever. Not about aliens, not about like, oh, we're going to get conquered, or like another country's going to invade and we're all going to kill each other. It's about like, hey,
yeah, it's just our fault. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we did something stupid, nature mutated, and now it's going to rape us.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's in a different sort of way than the first Godzilla was, because it's a lot less specific. It's just like nuclear is a problem and things, and everyone gets killed, but it's kind of okay. And there's not really a
biblical proportions.
Yeah. Does that mean we have to measure it in cubits now or something?
No, I'm not. No, I ain't doing that shit. I am not going to do that.
But there's not really a big speech or anything in original Godzilla. I don't remember that there is anyway, where somebody really spells out like, this is our fault and it's going to kill us all and we must put a stop to it in business and things. And it's like, yeah, well, flying saucers have to be shaped like saucers. Like, you can't have flying saucers, but they looked like ants. It's like, no, then they were flying ants, or they were UFOs that looked like flying ants. They weren't flying ants that were flying saucers.
Yeah, like saucers are round in shape. That's why they're called saucers. You know, it's like, oh, it's a flying saucer because it's fucking round. I mean, like, but it looked like an ant. Oh, so you mean it's a UFO? No, it's a flying saucer.
Yeah, I mean,
was it round? No, it looked like an ant. Then it's a UFO.
It's really, really 50s of it to be like flying saucers. I mean, you had Earth versus the flying saucers, and everything was flying saucer shaped, just about, if it was aliens. But yeah, so like, they're ants.
Like that was the guy that was in the asylum, right?
Yeah, it's like, I know this sounds crazy, but he kind of looks around and is like, well, and he's like, well, you're not gonna laugh, right? It's like, we're the FBI. We don't laugh. Like, tell us.
I want to know when that actually became a thing, because, you know, it still happens today. It's like, oh, we're members of the CIA or like Agency 7 or anything, and it's like, because we're government funded, we don't find humor in anything in life.
No,
we're not going to laugh at you, but we are going to lock you away up forever for being insane.
Yeah,
so start talking.
And then we'll continue to lock you up because we can't have this leak out. Until then, we make a national radio broadcast and television broadcast where we tell everyone exactly what's going on.
It's only because, you know, it's a 50s movie. You know, we had to know for the umpteenth million time that they had to tell the audience, oh, yeah, ants, because they are ants. They're giant ants, not the small ants in your kitchen. They're giant ants because radiation, because of nuclear testing. I'm sure you remember that. I mean, you've been born since the 40s, at least, hopefully. You know, something, repeated over and over.
He does say that, too, doesn't he? He's like, ants, very similar to the kind you might commonly find in your kitchen. And it's like, is it him that says that, or isn't the scientist guy that says it when he's showing the film?
I want to say the scientist was talking about, like, the ones that you'd find in your backyard.
Maybe it is, yeah. It's like, much like that. So, well, yeah, like the only ants we know that exist, like those, yeah.
But they're not the only ants that we know of that exist, because these are huge ants.
Yeah, but not everybody knows.
Yeah, well, the guys on the boat know.
Yeah. How big was that ant?
That thing was fucking huge, because that's what kind of got me, is just like that was like the biggest ant ever. Because like all the other ants.
Biggest ant ever.
Yeah. Like, you know, because like some of them ants are, you know, they're like really big, and, you know, you're up close to them and you see them and they're all lit on fire, and it's like, okay, well, ant's dead, and that's a pretty big ant. But like, no, that was like a rhinoceros, like just like charging to that wall and then grabbing the dude in his mandibles, and it's just like, okay, well, I've killed you now because I got you. That ant was fucking huge.
Yeah, how many of them could there have possibly been by that time? That a ship full of the military couldn't shoot them all in the antennas in time.
Yeah, well, even regardless if it's the antenna, you know, like it's the military, and the military has guns. Like, unless they just couldn't get to the guns, you know.
Yeah, maybe still. Not. But yeah, it's just like, and then they just, like, they're not even trying. Like, they're not going to clean it up. They just sink it. Like, the dude in the briefing is like, we sent another ship, and we sunk it. So don't worry about it.
Your tax dollars at work. Okay. The night guard at the tracks is the most trusting guy ever. Because seriously, 40 tons of sugar, and you're just going to be like, this guy, he heard nothing. He heard nothing. And like, you're going to need trucks to get rid of all that sugar. And it's just like, it's gone. And for one of the least important characters in this movie, he has like the best dialogue.
Yeah, he has that whole speech about how he's like, who like steals 40 tons of sugar? Like, have you ever heard of fence for hot sugar? It's like, well, no, I don't know. What would you do with that much? There's not like a big sugar black market. I don't think. You're not like really gonna make bank off of extra sugar just because, like, no, I but yeah, he it's like this big speech about it, and it's really super great, and he's not really that important at all.
And he says he didn't hear anything, and he probably, of course, he probably heard the wind, and we all know it ain't the damn wind.
Yeah. I mean,
and so
he didn't hear trucks, but there weren't any trucks. But it could not have been quiet ripping the side out of a rail car with mandibles. Like, that's got to make some sound.
Yeah, he was probably just asleep. It's probably what it was. Probably just asleep. Didn't hear nothing. Either that or he looked outside, saw some ants in it, thought he was hallucinating, and stopped drinking.
Yeah.
But it's like all that sugar. That's 40 tons of sugar. And even as the police, having no idea that these ants are out there, like, you would think that who would have a need for 40 tons of sugar? Just straight up. Just no.
No, I mean, you sort of get like this idea of like that there's like some gangster dudes in a warehouse somewhere with like this big giant truck full of, you can kind of see like there's the one light hanging overhead and they're arguing about how they're going to fence the sugar, and you can kind of see it over there in the back of the truck, and they're like, what are we supposed to do with all this sugar? Nobody can use all this sugar. How are we supposed to fence sugar? Have you ever fenced sugar before? What are we gonna do? The boss is gonna tell us, what are you spend all this time, you get all this sugar, we're gonna get caught by the police. And now we're stuck with it.
I can just see like the police like busting in there, and it's like, so what you got all this sugar for? We really like sweet tea.
Yeah.
All right. And so there's like the guy, and like, so the police are arresting some people. And there's like some drunks, and then there's like the cheating whore, and they're like, oh, well, police, who have you arrested today? And she's like, oh, because magically, if they've arrested anybody, they might have a clue. It's a terrible lead up, and they're like, okay, well, we got some drunks, and then we got this chick who was speeding. And, oh, so were you trying to run away from something? No. Okay, then get out of here. I don't care about you. And then you have like the drunks, and like it's like the two drunks who are like awfully polite and well mannered for being drunks. But then there's like the third guy, and it's like, oh yeah, the third guy.
He was annoying.
Take him to the ward because he keeps, God, like fuck that guy. And his like, he's like, you're not here to enlist me, are you? Like, no. What do we? No, you're here for target practice, you little bitch.
I guess maybe he's been drunk since the end of the war, so he's not real clued in to that the war is over.
Well, it's just, I'm just thinking about it, and it's just like, this is just crazy, and he annoys the shit out of me. And then the guy that's in the bed right beside him, he's just so much nicer, and just like, he was nicer than I would have been. And it's just like, you see this big old burly guy, and he's like, please, my nerves.
Yeah.
And I would have already like taken a brick and caved the guy's skull in, because I'm tired of hearing him say, make me a sergeant of the booze.
Yeah. I mean, that guy looks like he would have been, like, he's one of the gangsters from the Sugar Heist movie.
That's almost like, that's something that needs to be made. An old black and white gangster movie about stealing the 40 tons of sugar because it wasn't actually the ants. They just grabbed the wrong cargo. That's all it was. It was a total mistake.
It's not who wants it, it's who gets stuck with it. So how do we find out the kids are missing? Does like the woman just come in or something, or what? Or do the police already know, like they investigated earlier? Like, how do we find out about Mrs. Lodge?
I guess I think she was having like the thing, like the missing kids and husband. There was like the car wreck, and there was the guy and his arm was missing.
Oh yeah, they found the arm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like all that kind of stuff, and it's like, oh, like the arm belongs to this man who was like married to Mrs. Lodge, and there's supposed to be kids, but we can't find the kids, and all this other kind of business, and we don't know where they would have been at because stuff.
And she doesn't know either,
and
because they went to different places.
She doesn't know. Like fucking, can't the husband have enough responsibility to at least be like, oh, well, I'm thinking about taking the kids down to this area today, and I think it might be like some fun for them. So, that's where we'll be at, and then we'll come back home for lunch. So we expect lunch to be ready because, you're a woman and I'm a man and I'm having fun with the kids and you got to work.
Yeah. I mean,
because, sexism and the 50s.
It was kind of a heavy scene, though. Like there's a lot of stuff in this movie where like all the seriousness of the investigation in the beginning, and then they get a little goofy here or there, where he's like biblical proportions. But that scene where they talk to her about the missing kids, and she gets all upset about like dumb little stuff that just makes her upset thinking about it. Like it's they used to come home and the clothes would be all dirty, and she would need to like take all day to clean the clothes. Like it was kind of sad and kind of heavy. So
well, I just want to know why it took her fucking all day to clean the clothes.
I don't know. I mean, shouldn't have like be that big a deal. I mean, like it's like even if she was having to wash them by hand, it should not take all day to clean like 3 sets of clothes. No, I mean, we're in the 50s, not the Dust Bowl. Washing machine. They have washing machines. Well,
that's what I'm saying. Like if she did have a washing machine, then it's not like she's really having to do anything. Throw them in the washing machine, add some soap, turn the bitch on, go back to what you're doing. I'm saying if she had to wash them by hand. She had to wash them clothes by hand. I mean, it's like 2 little kids and then dad, which is the equivalent of just washing 2 sets of dad's clothes.
Yeah. And probably not even dad's clothes, because I doubt he got that dirty as the kids did. It's the 50s. He's probably wearing a suit or something. Or because it's the 50s, he's going to get knee deep in the mud with the kids in his suit and not care.
It's all right. Your mom will wash it for me. That's terrible. No, and that fucking drunk. Like, that's the only reason he's in this thing, is just to be like, oh, well, where are the kids at? We gotta find the kids. We need a clue. We need a link. Oh, well, his window leads over the LA River because, the LA River and shit, stuff happens down there. And it's just like, really? There's like so many other better ways they could have done that, because that was terrible. But fuck Miss Lodge. Fuck her. Fuck the drunk. Fuck those kids.
Miss Lodge is okay. Or Mrs. She's not a miss. She's married. But she
ain't married no more. He's dead.
Yeah, but still
He been married to a dead guy.
But she's widowed.
She's whatever. She was married to her currently deceased husband.
I mean, really, the kids just exist as an excuse that we can't just immediately firebomb the entirety of the sewers of Los Angeles. Because what about the children? They might still be alive.
Well, fuck the children. None of the children don't even really matter. Especially because, like, okay, so you have the old man scientist, and I like the old man scientist, and I kind of feel bad for him. Because, he's old, and so they won't let him do the stuff a young person could do. And so there's all this kind of shit between, women shouldn't do stuff and old people shouldn't do stuff and all this other kind of business. But the thing is, like, this old man is really gung-ho. And, like, if he was younger, he would be the guy with, like, 5 bazookas attached to, like, his arms, like, running down there being like, we're gonna fuck up all of these ants for science!
Yeah. When they're about to go down in the hole, he says, I would do it, but I'm old, but somebody must go. So, daughter.
So they're about to go down into the sewer, and they're going to find these ants. They're like, oh, we can just firebomb it. And then, like, Mrs. Lodge is there, and her only purpose for being there and looking sad and distraught is because her boys might be alive.
Yeah, she's just... Well, and then it actually doesn't come to anything anyway, because if that was the only excuse, that would be a problem, because it's like, okay, sure, we would like to save the kids. But you just told us the whole world is going to... Not even just Los Angeles, because he says we'll be extinct in a year if we don't stop it. So it doesn't matter. Like, we'll try to save the kids, but then we'll just firebomb it because everyone else is important too. At least that's not the only reason, though, because then they do have the queens. They have to check and see if more queens have escaped. So I don't even understand that the kids are like, but the kids, we can't do it because the kids. And then it's like, well, that's dumb. But then immediately it's like, and the queens.
Well, I mean, like that's all they really needed is just like, hey, we have to verify visually that the queens have not hatched and have not escaped. So we can firebomb this area and get rid of everything in one fell swoop. Because if we just burn everything now, then we'll never know. And if we don't know, we can't take the proper precautions to alleviate the situation. And that's good enough. I mean, that's saying, hey, if we don't do this, we could potentially be not knowingly causing the situation to escalate.
Yeah, because there might be others
so
somewhere else, and
with
we
me-
won't know until they start to attack, and then we really won't be able to stop it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like by doing this, then it's like that's a scientific reason. That's good. It works. It makes sense. And so it doesn't even fucking matter about them kids. Like, hell, like the kids could end up having a disease they caught from the ants, or, you know, maybe Miss Lodge can't actually drive because that's what her husband does, and then someone T-bones her, and the kids die from that because there's not, like, seat belts everywhere in the 50s, and whatever.
No seatbelts at all. Like, the cops are riding along in the beginning with the girl in there, and, like, no seatbelts. And they're the cops.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, is like, so I don't give a shit about these kids. You know, I would be the asshole being like, so we're getting ready to firebomb this, and then the dude walk up and be like, but what about the children? And I'd go, they can burn in hell too. Prepare the firebombs. Firebombs everywhere, and the ants are dead, and then whoopee. And then the old man scientist would get mad at me because now they can't find out if the queens are still there or not.
Yeah. But then as bad a time as the Navy was having with the ants, like, they still haven't gotten to the kids yet, just through those pieces of wood.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, okay, so, like, some of the ants, like, they take the sugar, try to eat some people and all this kind of business. But, you know, like, if the ants are collecting food, the ants are just going to collect food. It doesn't matter what the food is. If it's food that they can eat, they're going to collect it, because that's what they do. And so, like, the kids are down there, and if the kids are food, they're just going to kill the kids anyways and have them stored with the food, with the rest of the sugar and all that other kind of business. And so, the fact that they don't go for the kids, I call bullshit. I call bullshit on that.
Well, they are going for the kids when the
alive.
cop happens on them, though. They're like, the kids are over there and they're hiding behind like slats of wood or something because they were constructing that area of the tunnel, and the kids are like up against the wall and the ants are trying to crawl through. It's like they haven't gotten through yet. That one just like
how many
busted
days was that?
through
Like
the,
2 days?
the window. I don't know. It's something like that. A day, or not super long, but at least a day probably. But then they save the kids. Like, the kids get to live. But the cop gets killed. It's like the ant just like bites him with the mandibles, and then he dies.
With bazookas.
So how do we feel about stars?
Well, I'm going to give this movie 4 stars. I like the film. I like the story. The acting wasn't too bad. There wasn't a lot of problems with it, but there were the tiny things that just kind of built up and built up and built up. You know, they kept talking about the wind. There was the drunk. I didn't like the wife. The stuff with the kids irritated me. It's just a ton of little things that just kind of added up and knocked the star off. So I'm gonna have to give it 4 stars. But for the ants, I'm gonna have to give the ants 2 stars, because 1 star means that they were physically there. The 2 stars mean they actually looked like ants, but they didn't do anything. I mean, like seriously,
what would
it's
a
like,
1-star giant ants movie ant look like?
have you ever seen the birds from Birdemic? It'd be kind of like that. Like, it's just like a drawn ant on like a sheet of like clear plastic, and they just put that on the lens. Like, oh, there's a giant ant. Like, holy shit, that's so scary. Fucking 5th graders. But that's the thing, is like, okay, so you have like they had something working for them. Like, they were large, they look like ants. I guess that they could have done a little bit more to make them look like they were moving, actually did something within the film, because half the time they show up and they just kind of like stand there and bobble their head and make noise. And if I was to run across one of these ants, you know, I'd probably go, oh, holy shit, what's that? It's a giant ant, but it's not doing anything, so it's probably fake. And then I'd go about my business. You know, they have like, the ants actually move like twice. Whenever they like get seen for the first time with the lady scientist, and the giant ant that breaks through the wall. And all it really does is just move forward. It doesn't climb over anything. It's like they just stuck that ant on a dolly and pushed it through the wall to grab the guy, and that was about it. If they had the ants actually do more, so you could see the physicality of the ants as these special effects played out, then I would definitely have to give them a higher score. But a model of an ant, a movie monster, it does not make.
I guess. I mean, they're not that good, but I guess they didn't really bother me that much, though. I mean, they still, I guess more, because the sound is, like, kind of creepy or so. I mean, really, it's kind of the Super 8 problem. Like, they're more scary before you see them, because you have the sound, and you're like, there's big holes busted in stuff, but then when you actually see them, because they couldn't do that much, so it does kind of break down. It still doesn't really bother me that much, and I like most of the rest of it. Like, the drunk he's really annoying. And the mom and the kids are kind of unnecessary, but all the other stuff, like the holes busted in things, and they're investigating, and it's like, kind of, they sort of tie it to and it is the first, not that it matters that it's important about how I feel about it, but that it's the first sort of radiation caused a thing movie. But I still, like, I do really like it. Like, it's like
I enjoy watching it.
Either my favorite or one of my favorite movies of this type from especially this period of time. But it's like, it does most of the stuff right that Tremors does that other things get wrong. And I think I do really, really like it. I think I have to say 5 stars, which is kind of surprising to me that I rate it more highly than you do, because maybe it's not that surprising, I guess. Maybe because you like monster movies in general more than I do. Maybe your standard is different or something, but I really like it. It's definitely one of the best of this type of this period, especially because they pretty quick after this get even more silly than the silly parts of this are. So,
Pat, if these monsters got started as a result of the first atomic bomb in 1945, what about all the others that have been exploded since then?
I don't know.
Nobody knows, Robert. When man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world. What we'll eventually find in that new world, nobody can predict.
Well, that's all we have to say about them. Join us next week when we'll be watching Death Train. We'll see you then.
With bazookas.
And damn it, it's not the wind.